Today, we're going to talk about what's a corporation. What does that mean? How is it structured? What's the purpose of it? So first and foremost, the purpose of having any business entity, like a corporation or an LLC, is to have some personal liability protection. When you set out to do business, liability might arise, especially if you're like an axe throwing range or something like that, and you want to protect your car and your home and your personal bank accounts from that liability. Having a business entity, a corporation is what we're talking about now, in place helps to basically be a backstop and prevent any liability from the business from reaching your personal assets. That's one of the big reasons for having a corporation in place. There are others, just like with an LLC, and with a corporation, one of the other big ones is going to be when you have investors. So if you're raising outside money from someone that just wants to write a check, give it to you, they don't want to be involved in the running of the business, they just want to sit back and get money when there's profit. Now that is a great opportunity for a corporation. Corporations are a great vehicle to raise money like that. And the reason for that is part of how they're structured. So corporations are structured shareholders at the top, those are the owners, they're called members in an LLC, but shareholders in a corporation, they have all the shares and the ownership. They vote on things that mainly just affect other shareholders, but they appoint the board of directors. The board of directors votes on not necessarily day-to-day things, but a lot of the other decisions that aren't huge for the shareholders and aren't necessarily day-to-day for the officers. So that board of directors, which sometimes is some of the shareholders, sometimes it's even some of the officers, but it's sometimes outside people. Maybe one of those investors requests that they have someone on the board of directors so that they can exercise some control over the company. So remember, shareholders, the owners, they appoint the board of directors. Sometimes there's some overlap. The board of directors a lot of the time is in charge of hiring, and they would hire the officers, the CEO, the COO, the treasurer, the CFO, things like that, who are instructed by the board to carry out the day-to-day decisions for the company. So that's kind of the structure that you would understand for a corporation, and it's also why corporations aren't necessarily the best for small companies that are only a few people, because then you could see where you're the shareholders, you're the board, so you got to elect yourself and instruct yourself to carry out some decisions and tell yourself as the officers to carry out those decisions, which is why LLCs oftentimes are better for small companies like that, but not always. And again, corporations are really good for that outside investment. And of course, both LLCs and corporations are going to be good for that personal liability protection. Now, corporations, another interesting thing, and I'll touch on it briefly because I cover it better in another video, but preferred stock and common stock. That's the type of shares that you can issue in a corporation to the owners, the shareholders. And now a lot of the times, the easy thing or the better thing to do for corporations is to give those outside investors, those people that wrote that check that aren't involved, preferred stock and limit the voting of that stock so that they don't have a lot of say in the company at all because they didn't want it in the first place. And you, as common stock owners with voting rights, do then have more opportunity to vote and make decisions for the company. And that's a good way to have that separated ownership, voting and non-voting, for outside investors and people that are actually involved in running the company. So, to quickly recap, corporations are good for protecting your personal assets from liability. If you observe your corporate formalities, watch my other video on that. And they're good for outside investment. And you can definitely be very flexible in how you structure that investment and the rights that owners get. And remember the terminology for corporations: shareholders are the owners, they own shares. And another very important topic, real quickly, is how you can expand the ownership of a corporation. If you have shares in a corporation, there's such thing as authorized shares and issued shares. And if you authorize shares, you can continue to authorize shares and continue to expand the number of shares that are available. No matter what, you're always going to issue shares. Once they're issued, they become ownership, and only the issued shares are going to be the 100% ownership of the company. I cover this in more in depth in another video, so tune in for that. But essentially the idea and what I'm trying to illustrate is that corporations have ever expanding ownership pools if they want, and that's what causes dilution that you hear about with big companies. So corporations, definitely a little bit more complex than maybe an LLC, but hopefully this was helpful to explain it. And if you have any questions on any of the specific pieces of this, feel free to find it in another video. And if I don't cover it in another video, go ahead and email me and I'll cover that for you. Thanks. Have a good one.